Okay, today we are talking about our CO 6.2, adding integers. Yesterday we talked about those integers. We talked about the positive and negative numbers. So today we're going to be adding together. So the first thing we're going to learn about is absolute value. Absolute value is the absolute value of a number. A is the distance between A and 0 on the number line. The absolute value of A is written as the two lines with the A in between it. So when we're looking at our number line, it could be 3 or -3. They are both 3 spots away from 0. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So their absolute value is just how far away from the 0 it is. It doesn't matter if there's a positive or a negative. You're counting how many times it takes us to get to that 0. Adding integers with absolute values. If they are the same signs, you add the absolute values and then use the common sign. So you're using the same numbers and then you're putting the sign on it. So if we have +5, we don't have to put the positive sign like that. We could say 5 plus 3. We add the two together and it equals a +8. If we have a -4 plus a -5, we're adding the absolute values. 4 plus 5 is 9, and then you use that common sign. So it's going to be a -9.
So it's really when you're adding negative numbers, the number just gets smaller.
If they're both negative, yes. If they're both negative, they both get smaller. So if we look here, we had -2, -4. I don't know what I was looking at. So we start at -4 and we're adding -5. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get us to the -9. So William is totally right. Adding those two negative numbers, it gets to be an even smaller number. When you're adding two positive numbers, if we start at 5 and we go up 1, 2, 3, we get to that +8. Adding two positives get a much bigger number. Adding two negatives gets you a much smaller number. Here's where the tricky part comes in. When we have different signs. So if you have a positive and you add it to a negative. So what you're going to do is you're going to subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater absolute value, and then use the sign of the integer with the greater absolute value. Whew, that was a lot of big words. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, I'm going to put the examples up here and you write them down on your paper so you know what that means, because just reading it gets a little confusing. Sometimes you need to see it. So you should be writing the examples that I put. You should write those examples. Write this example on your paper. So if we have, let's say, that +5 plus a -4. It says, subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater absolute value. So our lesser number is 4. Because remember that absolute value, we don't worry about positives and negatives when we're looking at that absolute value. So what that would be 5, and we want to subtract it, -4. So we're taking the bigger number, we're subtracting out the smaller integer, and we get 1. And then we want it to be the sign of the larger number, so that 5 is a positive number. So our answer would be a positive 1. So it says to add, but because they're different signs, you actually subtract. So if we see that on our number line, we have a positive 5. So we go out all the way out to that positive 5. But then we have a negative 4, so that's a minus 4. So we have to come back 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have that. You can use that number line if it helps you to visualize what it is you're doing. So we're going from that positive 5, going back negative 4, because we know negative numbers go to the left. So we have that positive 5 to the right and a negative 4 to the left. And that's how we end up at the 1. Anthony?
So if you subtract both negative numbers, it gives you an even higher number.
If you're subtracting 2 negatives, you would go to negative 4, and then you would go out negative 9. So that negative 5 gets you to the negative 9. So you said a bigger number. It's actually smaller. Remember, when we're going to the left, we're getting smaller. When we're going to the right, we're getting bigger. So that 9 looks like a big number, but because it has a negative in front of it, it means it's smaller. We're adding today. So we're just worrying about adding our numbers together. Are you talking about this subtracting?
No, like subtracting.
So you're saying if we did negative 5 minus negative 4?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that tomorrow. You're skipping us ahead to something else. Okay, so we're going to hold on to that question till tomorrow. I love that you're thinking ahead, because adding and subtracting go together. We'll go through those tomorrow. Is this making sense? Those different signs? All right, I'm going to erase this so I can move the page up. So we had the same signs, and then we had the different signs. You can use that number line. Remember, for those different signs, if it was 5 plus that negative 4 equals 1, because we used that number line, we went to the right for the positive, to the left for our negative. Oh, for goodness. Okay. So now we're going to look at the opposites. The sum of an integer and its opposite is 0. So remember that opposite, we had 4, and negative 4 is its opposite. So what that would look like here is 4 plus negative 4 equals 0. So we go to the right 4, we go to the left 4, and we're back to 0. So the sum of an integer and its opposite is always 0. 50 plus its opposite, negative 50, it will be 0. 1,000 plus a negative 1,000, always going to be 0.
So
William?
anything that it's itself for a negative number will always equal 0?
Yes. So the opposite of an integer plus its opposite will always be 0, because a negative 5 and a 5, they cancel each other out. Positive 5 and negative 5, it cancels out. Tristan?
Isn't that just division?
No, this is adding. Division is different. And plus 5 divided by 5 would be 1. So it's a little different. It's the same like rules like we have for that, but this is with the adding. All right, so find the sum. Now we have a couple of work problems. Find the sum of -5 plus -3 using that number line. So look at that number line on your paper. Start at -5, and you're gonna go -3. They are like signs. So what direction am I going to go? To the left. I went -5 from 0 to -5 was to the left. Now I have to go to the left again for that -3. So our answer is going to be -8. Because we went from to the left for -5, then to the left for -3. And we ended with that -8. So we can look at the absolute value of -5 is 5. The absolute value of -3 is 3. We add them together, and then we put what the sign is. Very important that we don't forget to put that negative sign, because -5 plus -3 is not a +8. So it's very important to remember to put your sign. Now let's look. The number line shows the charges of an atom is 11 protons, which are +11, and 10 electrons, which would be a -10. Which expression represents the total charge of the atom? So they gave us 4 multiple choices. We can cross some off right away because they're not using the information that we were given. So let's look at, if we have a +11 and a -10, is A going to be the answer? No, because it says -11, +10. So we can cross A right off. We know it's not using the numbers that it gave us. This one has a +11 plus a -10. Maybe. I'm going to check to see if there's a better answer. But I see a +11, and I see a -10, and I see we're adding it because we want to know the total charge. And if we're looking for the total, we know that totaling things means we're adding. So that's a possibility. Let's look at C. We have a +11 and a -11. We have -11 in our problem? No, we can cross that off. Then we have a +11 and a 0. No. So we know our answer just by process of elimination. We can figure it out. So when you get these multiple choice questions, look to see what information are they giving us, what information is in the answers choices. These next ones aren't on your paper, so you're going to need to write them. Okay, so you remember how to do these.
How many more questions are there?
This.
Just two?
Yep. So find the absolute value of the number. Remember that absolute value is just the integer, no sign. So what would the absolute value of 8 be? 8. What's the absolute value of -7? 7. What's the absolute value of 0? 0. So finding that absolute value means you just take the sign off. Just have the integer. Adding two integers using absolute value. So find the sum of -3 plus -10. So using that absolute value, the absolute value of -3 is 3. The absolute value of -12 is 12. We're going to add that together. So 3 plus 12 is 15. We look to that negative number there. So that was -3 plus -12 is negative 15. And then I have solve for x. I think that might have been for next week's. Oh, no, I take that back. These two go along with these. So the solve for x, we have two problems over here. So this would be our A, this would be our B. So this one I should have written up here. So that was 3 plus 12. And it was 15, and then we put that negative in. So now let's look if we have to figure out what number could we put in for x if its absolute value is 15. What number could x be? Answer? It could be negative 15. Because the absolute value of negative 15 is 15. What other number could it be? Peyton? Positive 15. It could be either of those numbers, either a negative 15 or a positive 15. Look at our second one. This time we have absolute value of x plus 1 equals 24. What could x be? Brielle? So if I put negative 24 plus 1, is that going to equal 24? Do you want to change your answer? Remember, we're doing absolute value. So, but our answer we want to be 24. 23. So the absolute value of 23 is 23 plus 1 equals 24. What other number could it be besides positive 23? Negative 23. Because both of their absolute values are 23. 23 plus 1 equals 24. William? Okay. Is that making sense? Do we have any questions? All right.